everyone, my name is Kurt Hoffman and I'm the author of the Moral Universals poster and also an assistant professor of social work at Spring Arbor University in Spring Arbor, Michigan. So the purpose of this video is just to kind of walk you through a little bit of an insider's look on the poster, why I wrote it and how you can use it in your life. So the most basic reasons for why I wrote it is because of two things. One is the confusion that exists around cultures and morals, specifically in the areas like as a response, moral relativism or cultural relativism. So I suggest that it's obviously true that there are values and norms and beliefs and attitudes, et cetera, that are relative to particular cultures. It's a way of defining and understanding how cultures are different, distinguishing how some cultures do one thing and other cultures do another, and so forth. But in the process of embracing cultural relativism or moral relativism purely, is that we lose any capacity to also show or say or argue that things like sex slavery, human trafficking, gender violence, or monstrous dictatorships or whatever are actually morally wrong. Because isn't it just the case that those are cultural things, that's their culture? They just like to abuse women, or they just like to gas people, or they just like to enslave others and buy and sell them, or whatever. That's their culture, that's their thing. So wrestling with these realities, wanting to both embrace the reality and the meaning and the value that different cultures are different and different people have different belief systems and morals, but also not throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, by therefore just saying, well, it's all relative, it doesn't matter, and lose the capacity to show that things can actually be universally wrong. So in response to this, I wrote the Moral Universals poster that it articulates and identifies these 10 key areas that are so basic to human nature, that every human being encounters them, experiences them, and actually interprets them and creates their values and their belief systems and their cultures out of how they understand human nature and how they define norms within each of these moral domains. So in other words, there is human nature. We are universally the same in human nature, that we're fundamentally human, that what we are is the same. We don't get to just decide what a human being is. A human being is what it is, and what's different is how we interpret it or how we understand a human being, how we define a human being. So it's in this context, for example, like I love to use the example of the Second Great World War. Adolf Hitler and the Nazis had a particular idea about what a human being was, that race fundamentally defined the nature of human beings, to the point of those who were further evolved and more progressed were the supreme race, and all the other ones could be annihilated or utilized for slave labor or whatever. And in response to that, much of the rest of Western civilization and the world said, no, we affirm that human beings are created equal and we're the same, and therefore there's your division, there's your collision, and there you have the war. That it's fundamentally an ideological battle between how one understands human nature. And so again, if it's all relative, then it doesn't matter. Hitler is just as right as we are right, that neither one is absolutely true. But if it's a case that we are equally human, and that's clear and that's obvious, and we can actually show that, then we can look at something like the Holocaust and rightfully be saddened and discouraged and infuriated about how people can be treated on our planet. So what we end up seeing here is that human nature is one thing. It's fundamentally a thing, that we're definitively human beings. Universally, we're the same in light of our equality and sameness. In that light, we're diverse in some of our other areas. So we all have reason, we all think. We might communicate differently, but we communicate ideas, we communicate beliefs. In fact, even the idea of morals being relative, or cultures being relative, or even truth being relative, is an absolute statement. It's a claim of like, universally, this is true. Universally, it's a case that everything's relative. So my point is saying this to highlight that all human beings interpret their experiences. All human beings have a mind and have reason and use them to make claims about the absolute reality of things. So that's one, and that's in the area of our consciousness, that we all are the same, that we all think and we all understand. So I might go to Cambodia and not speak the language. So I might have to find a different way to ask where is the bathroom than if I were in the United States to ask the same question. But I will recognize who the humans are and know that we speak a different language, but I guarantee you there's a bathroom around here somewhere, because they're humans too, just like me, and they need a bathroom. And I just need to find a way to communicate with them, recognize that they're conscious and cognitive, they can understand and think just like I can. And so I just come to them and find some funny way to use hand gestures or whatever to say, where's the bathroom, if that makes sense. And so some other areas that are so basic to human nature that show up in every culture worldwide, in addition to the area of consciousness and values, is justice, right? Every culture will have some concept or idea of what justice actually is. Now, of course, we think of justice differently, we apply justice differently, but every culture or civilization or people will have a response of saying how equals should be treated equally, what makes us equal, what doesn't, who's in charge, that's authority, that we all have areas of authority, and kind of how those being developed are being taught, and who's in charge and all that kind of good stuff. So authority, justice, also something like work. It's so basic, but it takes work to create anything, and it takes work to sustain anything. It's not possible for a human being to be alive and not work. Minimally, like, it's gonna take work for me to just lay in my bed all day long. And the nature of work is that it requires hope. We only work for something to where we have our hope. I'm not going to work a job if it's absolutely hopeless. I'll earn the wage that I'm promised, or something like that. If I am guaranteed I'm not gonna get a paycheck, I'm probably not gonna go punch the clock and work, because it's hopeless. So in any case, these areas and several more are just, they're so basic to human nature that regardless of how developed a civilization or a people or a group are, these things are so basic that they're always interpreted. They're always morals and values and ideas and beliefs and customs and norms that are responding to these domains. That what's different is not the domains themselves, is not human nature itself, but what's different is the worldview that's being used to interpret human nature. What's different is how we think about and make sense of, and what meaning we attribute to the things that exist in reality. So in use, this poster can be used to create more cultural competency, like a very rich and textured level of cultural competency. That it's not just about, hey, we speak different languages but we can still get along or something, but that we're whole people and we all have these areas in common in a very rich and full and textured way, and we are interpreting these specific areas differently. We're interpreting it differently, which allows us to have meaningful dialogue, humble dialogue, peaceful dialogue that both recognizes fundamentally different interpretations about reality, while also not just being judgmental and bullish and naive about different cultures and what they believe and so forth. Likewise, I'm hopeful that this poster can be used to show how we can recognize cultures are diverse, that values and norms are diverse from household to household, city to town, state to state, country to country. But being, incredibly culturally competent, we can be thoughtful and mindful of affirming the significance and that all of these things really, really matter, but still there remains an actual truth, an actual reality, a human nature of what it is and how humans ought to affirm and do what's good for humans based on their nature. Because like I said in another video about the human elements poster, what's good for something is based on its nature. So what's good for humans is based on their nature. So human nature is definitively something. We're fundamentally rational, we have feelings and emotions and make choices and we live, and all these other things that these domains speak to, we have that in common. So therefore we can work from them to show that there are universals, that things like human trafficking and slavery are not just immoral but they're irrational, that we should not treat equals unequally in these ways. That things like gender equality, they're not just immoral or culturally relative, but they're irrational and they don't match reality. They don't match the nature of things as we are as actual human beings. Because in this context, for that example, both male and female, we still think, we still are rational, we still dialogue and communicate. It's more basic than the differences that exist regarding our gender, if you will. So in any case, I hope you find it challenging, engaging. I hope you go through it step by step and just kind of write down your questions, journal as things come up. And minimally, hopefully you recognize that tension that exists, that is just going to require you, if you're in the helping professions, definitely, for example, but just as a person, that you have to recognize that we can preserve what things like cultural relativism and moral relativism are trying to preserve, which is that all these cultures are different and that matters, and how we treat them and care and talk and dialogue and work together. But that also we can still affirm basic human nature, human dignity, the value of all people, and use that as a common ground to work from to discuss our differences, our different interpretations as we wrestle with each other in the world of ideas. Anyways, I appreciate it, and that's it. Peace.